recently Spawn turned 350 issues old, and I started to pick up the books again. I collected the first 100 issues, not when they came out. It was after I figured out about the character, and then some other ones here and there, but I haven't ever collected it as a book all the way through. I wanted to do a quick rundown. I've picked up the last 4 issues, and I wanted to kind of run down those, mainly issue 350 on its own, because it serves as a conclusion to what was going on before, as well as a setup for what's taking place after. And then I wanted to break down some of what's going on between 351 and 354. So just as a little bit of background, Spawn first came onto the scene in May of 1992. It was the second title released under the Image comic label, and it is the longest running independent comic book, and probably will be until Todd McFarlane dies, at least. Image Comics was a company founded in the early 90s by some comic book rock stars, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, and Eric Larson, among some others. Since Spawn's creation, he has been the flagship character for Image Comics, and in recent years the character has seen a boost in popularity, so Image began to make some more titles in response. In 2021, Gunslinger Spawn, King Spawn, and The Scorched were launched after Spawn issue number 300, and more have been launched since after Spawn issue 350, including Rat City, Salmon Twitch, and Monolith. All the titles helped to build to what was happening in issue number 350. Issue number 350. So for starters, I just want to acknowledge how awesome the cover looks. It's done by Brett Booth. It is beautiful. I like Brett Booth's art in general, but this thing just attracted me to the book. And so, first of all, awesome. Aside from that, like I said, this is the final issue to the arc that's going on, as well as kind of the opening issue to what's going to be taking place moving forward. And so I didn't read the stories prior to this, and I really didn't need to. Like, I felt like everything I needed to know was kind of already there. I did some research afterward on a few of the characters who were in the book, because I didn't know exactly who they were, like She-Spawn or Redeemer. But aside from that, honestly, you could have read it without it. It was awesome. The basic story is that the old way of things is being upended, and there will be a new status quo moving forward. The throne of hell is up for grabs, and various characters are vying for that power, including Sin, the Clown, and Spawn. Spawn, we learn in the end, doesn't really want the power, but he's just trying to stop Sin and the Clown from getting it. So he arranges for another character who I'm not incredibly familiar with, but who has existed prior to this, Nyx, to take the throne, while he distracts the Clown and Sin in a battle. And then Sin just completely annihilates, or Nyx completely annihilates Sin. It's the end of him, so that was a bit sad to see. After that, she banishes Spawn and all of his companions from hell to Earth, and when he gets there, he finds She-Spawn, and they find out that they can't use their powers due to whatever Nyx has done. And they find out this because they're getting attacked by monsters. They kick their butts the old-fashioned way with their chains and their fists. And the dying monster, one of them, tells them like that the entire Earth has now become a dead zone. And that's the thing in the Spawn comics, where the people or the individuals of heaven and hell are incapable of using their powers in these dead zones. So this was a fantastic issue. It provided a good shakeup to the Spawn universe moving forward, and it wasn't just a cheap retcon or a reset, but a continuation of the story, and it provides some new challenges for Spawn moving forward and some personal stakes for the character of Al Simmons himself too. So it's really hitting on a lot of good elements, and it's not doing it in any silly way. It's taking it very seriously. This was Brett Booth's first issue on the book, and I already talked about the cover, but just in general, his action in this comic is amazing. His artwork is really kinetic. It just has a lot of movement to it, a lot of different lines and places where it's just perfect. And honestly, he's a perfect addition to these books. It reminds me similar to one of the things that got me starting to collect Spawn, which was Greg Capullo's artwork. And it has a similar feel to it in that it hits all the right spots. And Brett Booth is definitely doing the same. Number 351 through 354, A New Era of Spawn. In this new era, Spawn has lost his powers due to the Earth being covered by a dead zone. And the new big bads are vampires being led by a man named Blood, who has appeared previously in the comics, I think starting around issue 200. He's been waiting for centuries for Heaven and Hell's sway over Earth to kind of wane, and since it did, in issue 350, he just stepped in and he assassinated 70% of Heaven and Hell's forces that were trapped on Earth following what happened in issue 350. Each issue has started with this whole 2 months ago thing, and covering various different elements from different characters' point of view to reveal what's taking place in the story currently, which is moving really fast, but it's really good. So far, we've learned that Spawn's friend, Eddie Frank, who was the Redeemer, he was a part of the Scorched comic books. He was a agent of Heaven, one of their best warriors. He apparently had been infected by a vampire in the past, and this is all in the comics. I read all this online. He'd been infected by a vampire in the past, and after issue 350, due to his being trapped on Earth and his powers being shut off, the vampiric elements took over, and so now he's an agent of Blood, working with them. And Spawn's been trying to find a cure for this, so as to save his friend before he tries to completely annihilate the vampires. While fighting some of the vampires, he crosses paths with a new character named Lyra, and in this last issue we learned that she's a hybrid, meaning her parents were on both sides of the war of Heaven and Hell, so the dead zones don't affect her. What I'm curious about is if her parents were a demon and an angel, which would just be kind of funky, but I mean, happens. And then the last issue ends with an old character making a return, another one who I don't really know well, but Jim Downing. I did a little bit of research on him too, and he's a newer addition as well to the Spawn universe. But very exciting to see that they're kind of keeping up with some of the older things taking place, as well as moving in a new direction, and doing a very good job of it. Honestly, this book has been incredible so far, and the best thing about it is just that it's a comic book story. You know, it's dude from hell with a special suit that gives him powers fighting demons and vampires, and there's not any time for a message or for an agenda. It's just fun stories with cool characters drawn really well. It's very basic, and I really like the new approach to the character. As far as this whole powerless thing, it's giving it a different approach, which is really cool to see that they're finding ways to make the character of Spawn just as awesome without his powers. So that's really fun, and Lyra is a pretty good addition to this book. So, I mean, overall, this book really excites me, and it reminds me that the comic book industry isn't really failing so much as it's just going through a sort of, revolution, and that whatever comes out on the other side is going to be the timeless stories like this. It's not going to be these things which are enraging everybody. Those things are going to be lost to the sands of time. So honestly, I suggest that anyone read Spawn and they try and pick up issue 350 through 354. It's a good jumping on point. I'm really happy that I did. I love the artist, Brett Booth. I would pick up his stuff a lot of the times. He worked on some other things like Flash in the past and a couple other DC books that I really liked, mainly because of his artwork. And aside from that, I did a little bit of talking about the comic book industry in general there. And I've talked about this prior, but I'm going to make a video on that just because I want to make clear my feelings on what's going on in comic books so that my bias isn't unclear moving forward while I'm making these videos, because I am being rather critical of a lot of different things. And in general, that's who I am. But also I just want to make clear where I'm coming from in my point of view. But aside from that, thanks for checking in on this, and I'm definitely going to be talking more about Spawn because I see that this book is going to be great moving forward. Goofy stuff. Goofy, goofy, goofy stuff.